And joining me now to talk about what it's like to cover this year's general election is a reporter from the Nevada Independent, Megan Messerly. Megan, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Oh, happy to be here.
First off, I have to ask you, what are you hearing about today about voter turnout and what it could mean for the outcome for the election here in Nevada?
Right, that's a good question. So, I mean, obviously, we heard, we've been hearing about some issues at some polling places, some places, not opening as early, or some issues with checking kiosks as well. So we have been hearing about that. During the day, but folks are, I think, pretty eager to get out there and vote. And so, we've heard about folks braving some pretty long lines, getting there early to cast their votes. I think the big question will be, what does turnout look like in these final couple hours? Turnout on election days perhaps not as robust as maybe we were expecting to see. Just because of the pandemic, it's sort of hard to know this year how many folks are going to turn out in person, because we've just never had a year like this before, right? With this amount of mail-in balloting, changes to early voting, just not everyone wanting to participate that way. And then now, with the in-person voting today.
Yeah, so I'm curious, how does that change how you report and how you cover this campaign compared to previous campaigns?
Well, I think the biggest change, I mean, obviously early voting is, by far the most popular voting method traditionally during normal years in Nevada. So we always, expect to see those ballots be cast early. But in some ways, the election started even earlier this year, right, with those mail-in ballots dropping very early in people's mailboxes, and some people just, filling them out and sending them back in right away. So that really changes how the campaigns have to approach this election. You can't just make it that final 2-week push as they might normally do with the early voting, and then this final push ahead of election day. It's sort of a different way of doing it, because you have people voting for this prolonged period of time. And then the big change really is the voter education piece of it, right? Making sure people know that there's different ways to vote this year, that they can participate by mail, that they can still go in person early. That was an option available to them, and they of course are allowed to vote on election day, as many people are right now.
I'm curious, because of all that early voting that we've seen, we believe today, now so more than ever, really, Republicans need the big turnout today, right? I would assume to turn Nevada red.
That's correct. Yeah, we've seen, comes as no surprise. Democrats really have been pushing the mail-in voting, trying to get their folks to vote that way. I was out canvassing with the Joe Biden campaign a couple of weeks ago, and their message was, get those ballots back in the mail. You don't want to wait. You want to get them processed. And we've seen a little bit more emphasis on the Republican side on, showing up in person on election day. President Trump has voiced, some concerns. He says he doesn't like the new, mail balloting process where all active registered voters in Nevada this cycle were sent their ballots, obviously. He says he prefers the traditional process, where you sort of have to request your absentee ballot. So that's been a different angle this cycle, but that plays into that partisan split that we've seen, right, and how people prefer to vote. Democrats have been doing very well during early voting, particularly in Clark County, which is really crucial for them, because Democrats need to drive up turnout in Clark County and to be able to win crucial elections, from the presidential race down onto some of these competitive legislative seats. So we've seen that emphasis from Democrats. And so, like you mentioned, today is all about, playing catch up. Republicans, want to turn out as many people. In fact, the Trump campaign and the Nevada Republican Party just filed a lawsuit, asking for the courts to keep the polls open until 8 p.m. because of those delays I mentioned earlier in getting the polls open this morning. And the reason for that is it's so important for Republicans to get every vote they can today, to be able to sort of close that margin that Democrats really have been able to achieve during the mail-in voting period, and then during early vote as well.
Yeah, our very own Joe Bartels is covering that for us as well.